It's actually 7:01, Charlie. But with that, we'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Al, let's start with roll call.
Benson.
Here.
Sarda. Here. Thurdy.
Here.
Gross.
Here. Present.
Ibom.
Here.
Minor.
Here.
Mayor Johnson.
Here.
City Manager Leon.
Here.
City Attorney Denherter.
Here.
All right. With that, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of August 13th, 2018, and the budget meeting of August 14th, 2018. What is your pleasure?
Move the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
1 second. Sarda.
Aye.
Burdick.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Hoffner.
Aye.
Ibom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 3, City Manager's Report.
Just a couple of items for you, City Commission and members of the public. As you heard when Al took roll call, there's kind of a new city manager. I've changed my name now to reflect my married name. As you know, Larry and I were married in February, and so after some overseas travel, I've changed my name. So I'll be using Amy Leon, and I'll be confused by that, as I already have been, and hopefully get used to that, saying that. But if you send me an email, it will go to that account, but we'll start making changes on that. So I have another new person to introduce. We no longer have an interim police chief. We have our permanent police chief, John Harris. So we'll introduce Chief John Harris, and we can take off the interim from his name. So I'd ask you to help me welcome him.
Well, thank you very much, Commission and City Manager. It's really an exciting new chapter and looking forward to it. Thank you.
This evening, you do have a work session on your agenda. However, I do not have a need for a work session.
You mean executive session?
Excuse me. I've got to learn my name and learn how to read the agenda. You have an executive session on your agenda. I do not have need for an executive session after all, which came about after the agenda was published, so we do not have to have an executive session. One of your consent items is a Dive in Yankton Forum. That will be September 5th, 2018 at the middle school at 7 p.m. in their auditorium. Dive in Yankton would like me to encourage you all to attend that. They'll be talking about fundraise, the funds that have been fundraised in the public, as well as their next steps for their project. If there's no further questions for me, I'll let you move on to your business.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the City Manager? All right, now is the time for public appearances. So if there is something that the public would like to address the Commission about, but it's not on the agenda, please step to the podium. All right, seeing no movement, we'll move on to the consent item agenda. So first we have a possible quorum event for September 7th, 2018 for a Spark event, and there will be no official action at this event. And number 2, we have another possible quorum event, September 5th, 2018 for Dive in Yankton's Open Forum, and again, there will be no official commission action.
I move the consent agenda. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions about the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed say no. Thank you very much. There is old business tonight, so we will move on to number 1 under old business, which is consideration of memorandum 18-178 regarding the request for a new retail on-off sale wine license for January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2018 from To Be Free LLC to RB Beer and Burgers, and this is at 2901 Broadway, Suite C, Yankton. What is your pleasure?
I move the memorandum. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do commissioners have any questions on this item? Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Hurley.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
Hoffner.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, motion passes. Number 2 under old business is consideration of memorandum 18-177 regarding the transfer of ownership of a retail on-off sale malt beverage license for July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2019 from RB Beer and Burgers, doing business as RB Beer and Burgers, to Be Free LLC, RB Beer and Burgers at 2901 Broadway. What is your pleasure?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Does the commission have any questions or comments on this item? Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Gross.
Aye.
Hoffner.
Aye.
Mybom.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Sarda.
Aye.
Hurley.
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, motion passes. Number 3 under old business is consideration of memorandum 18-173 in support of resolution 18-53 and resolution 18-54 authorizing sponsorship of a community development application for certified nursing assistant training under the Governor's Workforce Initiative and designating a project and environmental certifying officer. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dave or Amy, did you want to talk a little bit about this item?
We'll let Dave introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the Commission. In the past, when we have had projects that were eligible for Community Development Block Grant funds where somebody else other than the city might be an applicant, you as Commission have been asked to sponsor that. This is a similar situation where Yankton Area Progressive Growth and a consortium of local healthcare providers have targeted a Community Development Block Grant program for Governor's Workforce Initiative funds to really what looks to be complete a real exciting project to help with a shortage of certified nursing assistants. And with that being said, I guess I would turn it over to Greg Henderson from District 3. We have some formalities associated with applying for a block grant project.
Greg, welcome. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you. It's always good to be here when we're talking about grant opportunities. As Dave mentioned, there are a few housekeeping items that need to take place before you vote on your authorizing resolutions for this project. One of them is a housing and community development needs hearing. And basically what that is just opening the floor to any people's comments or ideas on housing and community development projects or issues in Yankton. We have a very good idea what the community is into right now. We have your strategic planning information, but again, the program requires a public hearing or public input to just gauge if there's anything else out there that people are interested in. So I guess I would just ask if the mayor would entertain any comments from the audience or from the commissioners about housing or community development needs, and then we can go forward after that.
Would anyone from the audience like to address the commission about our housing and workforce development needs? All right. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, if there are none, we do have our own little shopping list that we come armed with. So, I mean, we can insert
Perfect.
those. For example, promoting new development in workforce housing. Yankton is heavily engaged in that. Promote workforce development in general. Address education needs and opportunities in the community. That's a fairly broad brush statement. Develop the downtown and riverfront areas with a balance of employment, housing, and civic uses. Explore recreational opportunities. When I came in tonight, you were already talking about some of those issues. And ensure adequate connections to the region's transportation system. Again, those are fairly generic topics, and we'll probably mine your strategic planning list to pick up a few more from that if that's okay with the commission. So.
Absolutely.
Okay. With that, before you vote, I think it's worth the time because this group has been meeting over several months to develop this project because they basically started with an idea and they put legs on it, and now they're applying for $205,000 to help make it a reality. So Nancy, would you want to visit just a little bit about what the project entails?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Nancy Winandy, CEO, Yankton Area Progressive Growth. Rita Nelson has really done a lot of the legwork that's gone into this. She has a strong background in healthcare, which has really helped on this project. It came to our attention that for healthcare, there's a significant need in a lot of areas, but it really starts with the CNAs. So we're looking at a program to recruit and retain CNAs and hopefully create a pipeline which will then help fill LPN, RN, MedTech, a lot of other jobs within the healthcare career field. We're looking at starting the program, hopefully by implementing a HOSA program, which was a healthcare occupational student organization that's currently in the high school, and potentially starting that at the middle school level to give children exposure to healthcare careers, because we think that if we can market it in a way that all healthcare careers, whether you want to be a doctor, a nurse, or anything in healthcare, should start as a CNA position. There's a lot of opportunities in Yankton, whether it be in Majestic Bluffs, whether it be in some other elderly healthcare facility out at HSC. There's just a lot of CNA opportunities out there. So the program that we've created gets people into our pipeline. We're able to work with them to train them through the dollars with the CDBG funding. And that would be an 80-20 match with the healthcare facilities or other local sponsors. And then once they're in that program, then we'll be able to get them certified and then hopefully employed. The program is 18 months long, and then after they're in the program and employed as a CNA, we're hoping to utilize some of the Build Dakota grants or other opportunities if they choose to further their career in healthcare so that they can get some additional education and then continue to fill that pipeline up while we continue to fill it from the bottom with other kids coming in or people who are in other career fields wanting to move into healthcare. So it's really a great program. We're excited about the 18 months after it gets started to implement this. I want to thank all of our partners, first of all, the Governor's Office for providing us this opportunity. We've had at the table Mount Marty College, Yankton School District, Avera Health and Education Services, AHEC, obviously Rita with Workforce Development, the City of Yankton has been there. Department of Labor also has been there. The career counselors that are in the schools will be doing a phenomenal job and have been doing a phenomenal job for us and working to continue to promote this program. So there have been a lot of partners that have come together on this project, and we're really excited to see what the next 18 months could bring, assuming that this funding is approved. Any questions?
So has anything like this been done elsewhere?
They're actually looking for us to kind of be the pilot program. If we can create a successful pipeline of recruitment and retention, that it would be, you could replicate the program in other communities. So we're being very cognizant of the local match and what it would take. We've also looked outside of Yankton. We've had Menno, Irene, other Wakanda healthcare facilities come to Yankton and be a part of this, so we can talk to them as employers. What are their needs? What are the stumbling blocks that they find? They figure they need 3 part-time employees in CNA to fill one full-time position because the hours are so varied and the shifts can be very intense when you're working. And so if you're getting kids that are 16, 17, 18 years old, a lot of them aren't available for longer shifts. So they're kind of doing some backfilling and get creative. And as a part of this program, we're also looking for the facilities, the employers, to provide some incentives, which is great. We've seen a lot of that in the manufacturing community right now, but for part-time healthcare CNAs, that's really not been much of an opportunity or an option for them. So we're really excited for some of the employers, as long as we're taking care of a lot of the training and certification for them, if they can use some of those dollars and divert them into incentives to try and hopefully get people into the career field and stay in that career field a little bit longer.
So if you're a student that's interested in this, talk about the process they're going to go through.
That's still kind of getting ironed out, but right now we encourage them to be a part of the HOSA program that's already within the school system, and then through the school district they actually have an opportunity to do some of the certification while they're at the school during the day. And then we're also looking at potentially hosting a camp, which would be right at the end of the school year. so that they can go through the process within 2 weeks, hopefully pass their test and be certified, and then be able to go to work after that. But right now, you can go to Avera Health and Services as an individual, but you would be responsible for paying the costs of your own certification, and then you could go out and be employed. If you're employed by Avera first, they'll pay for your certification. Or if you pay for it yourself and become employed, they're federally required to pay for your certification. So there's a lot of opportunities for people who are looking to become CNAs, and a lot of people don't really understand the opportunities and the connections that you can make with people as a CNA. So we're trying to look at it beyond just the job duties, but really how you personally can benefit of establishing those relationships with the elderly population.
Just someone who works in the healthcare field and is aware of the challenges there are in filling those positions, I really appreciate your efforts on this.
You know, we're really excited to be able to take another pilot program. Rita's had such success in the other programs that she's created, and they've really been blossoming and being noticed around the state, so she gets a lot of the credit.
I'd like to thank you as well for this sounds like a good opportunity. Has anything been addressed about the pay? And the reason why I say this is because I know of an individual that left the city of Yankton because of a higher pay in a CNA in another city. Is that part of this at all, or do you see a projection of a higher pay in that field or not?
I think it's kind of a ripple effect, knowing that that job is pretty much at the bottom of the totem pole. If they're increasing salaries there, that means all of the other nursing and aide positions within the facility would also need to be increased. We feel that's why it was really important for us to create a pipeline. If we're taking individuals and really encouraging them to be CNAs, CNA is not a livable lifetime wage by itself. And so we want to create opportunities beyond being a CNA to stay in the healthcare industry. So are they addressing it as just a flat hourly wage increase? I don't believe they are at this time. But having some of those bonuses and those other stipends that might go along with it could incent people to stay in that job for a year or two and then hopefully expand their education and continue as an LPN or beyond.
I just have a comment for Greg. Because I thought of it as you were reading your list. One of the things that's important to us as an organization is inclusivity, and so if somehow you could phrase some of your language to make sure that housing and employment for all is a priority in our community, and that doesn't mean because you grew up here, or because you look like us, or because you speak our language, but that we welcome and include all. Thank you.
And to Jake, your question, there is a line item in the budget for bonuses
Great.
and pension stipends. So there may be opportunities for people to receive some monetary reward for sticking it out a little longer or for staying with an institution. So,
And just to point that out, like you mentioned, $1,000 stipend, looks like.
But that, just keeping in mind that that is an opportunity for the employer to provide that. That money does not come through the CDBG funding. No direct wages can be paid directly to any of the participants in the program. So that would be up to the employers. So one of the things that we're looking at is if they don't have to pay the certification costs, which will save them about $1,900, that they can divert that money into utilizing that as some type of stipend for the program. One of the other great opportunities that if you work out at the Human Services Center, that you have the opportunity to have reduced tuition prices for attending a state university. And I believe that that's one of the benefits of working out there that has been not promoted as much as it could be, because there's a lot of people who would really like to work part-time out at HSC, have reduced tuition costs down at the U, and receive that dual benefit. So I think that there's a lot of educational opportunities that we'll be able to include in our marketing materials to incent people to enter that career field. Thank you.
one final disclaimer before you may want to vote on the resolutions. The City of Yankton is providing these funds as a pass-through, but you are ultimately responsible for the proper expenditure of the grant. This is ground that you've trod before. Yankton has had numerous CDBGs over the years. This facility was a CDBG. So you've been there before. It'll be District 3's job to help make sure that there aren't any problems, and we'll be compensated for that as part of the grant. But I just want to let you know that you are ultimately responsible, and we'll do our very best to make sure that there aren't any regulatory or programmatic issues that you have to deal with. And the communication, I'm sure, will be forthcoming on how the project's progressing over the 18-month period. So those are all the formalities, I guess, that I needed to touch on. If you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
Are there any more commission questions?
Do you need to appoint someone then, or is that the city manager? Thank you.
Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Yes, Ed, please step to the podium.
My name is Edward Gleck. I see what a problem we're talking about wages. The whole city of Yankton got low wages now, and to become when you only get paid so much for being a certified nurse aide, and between wages for certified nurse aide between LPN and from LPN to a registered nurse, there's a big jump there. But some people make more money working in McDonald's. I mean, for what when you're a nurse aide, you're responsible for the patients. What do they do? They send the nursing home, they fall out of bed, you got to make sure they don't get hurt when they get. And there's something we should pay. We should be more. I like the idea that you help them get certified nurse aide, but also probably got to be responsible. We should be wanting them to get paid more so they can stay at a job instead of to go in McDonald's and work for half time and no responsibilities. So, being McDonald's, you're a nurse aide or LPN, whatever, you're responsible for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else from the public wish to address the commission on this item? All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you very much, everyone, for your work on this, and good luck. All right, now we'll move on to new business. Number one is an informational presentation and review by our old friend, Graham Forbes, auditor with Williams & Company, PC, of the 2017 City of Yankton Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports.
Thank
Take
you,
it away,
Mr.
Graham.
Mayor. As mentioned, my name is Graham Forbes with Williams Company, and just want to kind of share a few high points here, or points in general, I guess, on the 2017 annual financial report that we're just wrapping up. What I'll do is kind of work through the report that looks like some of you have in hard copy or maybe electronically as well, but I think probably you've had a chance to take a look at here maybe. But I'll just kind of work through and point out a few items, but feel free to stop me with questions, or if there's other areas I haven't hit on that there's questions or comments to be made on, please just let me know and we'll hit on those as well. Also want to thank Ann's here and Al and the rest of the city finance staff for working with us and providing us all the information we need to conduct the audit and do the legwork that we need to do to get that done, and then the information to put this almost 100-page document together. A lot that goes into that, and we appreciate their cooperation and assistance with that as well. So thank you all. But so I guess kind of to get going, the first item I normally point out, and will again here, is on the second page of the document. It's also the second page of our independent auditor's report, which is ultimately the product that is the audit itself, and that's us putting an opinion on these financial statements. And you can see on the second page towards the top the opinion paragraph where we say, in our opinion, in all material respects, that the financial statements are fairly presented. So that is a unmodified, or if you will, clean opinion, which is exactly what you want there. So didn't have to disclaim or provide any kind of adverse opinion because of any scope limitations or major problems that needed to be reported. So no issue there, which is outstanding. And then on page 4 starts what's called the management's discussion and analysis. That MD&A is some information that's put together by city staff. I usually call it the cliff notes of the report if you don't want to look at all 100 pages, but only want to look at maybe 10 or so. It's kind of a condensed summary, if you will, of the financials. And it also, the piece I find the most useful is that there's a lot of current year to prior year comparison with some commentary from city staff on why did some of these things change from year to year, and also addresses some of the upcoming financial events that they foresee as important, and discuss those as well. So great information there provided by city staff that I would advise you to take a look at if you haven't already. So from there, I'll flip back and just touch on a few of the financial statements here. Again, we're not going to try and put you to sleep and try and look at all 90-some pages of them here, but there are a few items I'll point out. But again, feel free to direct me with any questions you do have. Starting on page 20 are the statement of revenues and expenditures for the governmental funds. And as you know, there on the first column on page 20 is the general fund. And on these statements, we kind of start to break apart the city's operations by fund, which the overall operating fund of the city is the general fund, which is where a majority of our unrestricted dollars go, and where a lot of our general operations are funded through your public works, your parks department, and all the administration, and a lot of the folks in this room, all their expenses and operations run through that general fund. And I know one of the items that the commission tracks and that we usually try and touch on is that number of days expenditures in unassigned fund balance, which basically that number is one of the more important liquidity type numbers for city government and kind of government entities in general, to kind of say, okay, if things hit hard times, what's our pot of unassigned dollars we have to continue to fund the operations of the city if there's a hiccup in state funding or property taxes for some reason, some of the larger revenue sources of the city. And as you'll see, I'm going to jump around here a little bit. On page 17, you can see that there's about $5.8 million of unassigned fund balance in the general fund. Excuse me, at the end of December 31/17. And that equates to about 177 days of expenditures in that unassigned fund balance. And Al and I had discussions on that. That is, definitely not excessive, but probably at the high end of a good, healthy unassigned fund balance. That gets you, about exactly half a year, 177 or 108. And it went from, I don't know if I said that, from 177 days in 2016 to 183 days at the end of 2017. So a small increase, but about exactly half the year, which, like I said, is probably getting to the healthier end of an advised range, but nothing excessive or, any problematic area of that nature. But so that is, so that gets you on your property tax calendar. You got your kind of large 2 collection months, so it kind of bridges that gap and provides some cash flow and liquidity in between those times. So and a pretty minimal increase for the current year, about a $346,000 increase in overall fund balance in calendar 2017. So pretty stable operational year in 2017. So, and another item I'll point out there on page 20 is the Special Capital Improvement Fund, which is the 1 cent sales tax fund designated for the capital improvements and projects. Did see a pretty significant increase there, about 1.5 million in 2017. However, as you all know, with those project types funds, that's a very cyclical type of a fund where you can see large increases as we had this year, but then once a new large project gets undertaken, we might see a significant dip in that, on any given year as there's a spin down, if you will, on accumulated funds for large projects. So there again, I don't think anything that's alarming or out of the ordinary on that front as well. And the rest of the funds of the city really are pretty as expected and close to a break-even type operation for 2017 in the governmental funds, as you can see as you scroll across on pages 20 and 21 there. But and then quickly, I'll just kind of look at the same type of items for your city utility funds or the proprietary funds on pages 25 and 26 of the report. And there you'll see your two large or major funds as we're required to report them per a calculation that the Government Accounting Standards Board requires, but are the water and wastewater funds. And you'll see, for example, in the water fund, a pretty significant change or increase in this situation of net position. And that's a little bit misleading. That shows nearly a $3 million increase in net position. A lot of that is functionality of the construction of the new facility that's undergoing right now, because what's interesting is we're showing a large increase in net position, but if you flip back one page to the cash flow statement and look towards the middle of the page there in the water column, there was actually, the city has about $4.4 million less cash than it did a year ago. So it's just a little bit of a phenomenon where those dollars are being spent but aren't being depreciated yet because they're not placed into operation, and you know, the full amount of interest and repayment on those bonds that's funding that project aren't really in play yet, for lack of a better word. So, and Al and I had a good discussion as to, you know, their rates are being put in place to start to fund those bonds when the repayment term does start. So, you know, there's a method to some of the madness that's going on there a little bit as well too. So, but otherwise there in the wastewater fund, a little bit of the same phenomenon. You know, but it is showing a good, healthy increase in net position there as well. Any questions so far? Again, I'll try and keep things fairly brief here, but, you know, starting, you know, on page then 30 are the notes to the financials. I'm not going to dive into anything there, but if you are looking for a lot more detailed information on city accounting policies, makeup of the government, detail into the city's outstanding debt, or the last 3 or 4 years, there's a lot more information in there in detail on the city's pension plan and the city's post-retirement benefits, with more to come, with a few more standards that have just recently been issued. So if you have any questions on that, I'd be more than happy to answer them, but a lot of that's more detailed than we probably want to get into tonight. But
I got a quick question for you. I really like the, you were talking about the days, the number of the days that the city
Sure.
could operate. What was it, 170?
Yeah, it was 177 at the end of 16, and it's 183 at the end of 17.
Gotcha. Okay. So I really like to, I guess, think of our numbers in that way. I think that's beneficial for us as commissioners. But you also mentioned that kind of puts us at the high end. I mean, what's your insight into other communities? Do you have any idea there?
I mean, it varies. You know, I've seen anywhere as low as 30 to 40 days, which I definitely would not advise to be in that realm. But, you know, I guess what we usually say is, you know, we like to see in that, you know, 35 to probably 50%, which is about, you know, or of expenditures and unassigned fund balance, which we're kind of talking about the same thing. So you're about right at 50%. You know, and you know, where I'd say, you know, 30 to 35 kind of being, you know, a lower end of healthy, you know, up to 50% being, you know, again, nothing wrong or excessive, but probably, you know, much beyond that might be, you might get some of your citizens saying, well, why are you holding on to some of our money so long? You know, get in that realm. But I mean, you know, if you're at a whole year, you know, say you were at 100%, say you had 365 days of, you know, at that point, you know, I can see where, you know, some taxpayers are going to start to question why you're, you know, have a year's worth of your expenditures sitting in the coffer, but still collecting property taxes from you, you know, that kind of situation. But yeah, so it's a balancing act between that end of the spectrum versus just being, you know, enough liquidity that, you know, oh, payroll's coming next week. You know, you don't want to be in that situation either. But I guess normally what we, you know, would, you know, and again, every government's a little bit different, but that 35 to 50% range, which, you know, I guess then back it into number of days. So you're looking at, what would it be, you know, 90 to, you know, 180 days.
Uh-oh, Al's got something to say.
The only thing I'll insert on that is it's kind of interesting to listen to the auditors talk about, you know, 3 to 6 months, so to speak. And I can remember having just about a solid hour conversation with S&P for our bond ratings approximately 2 months ago, and them telling me that our balances aren't enough. So it's the perspective of how you're looking at what end of the business, so to speak. One of the things I talked about with S&P is that, for what it's worth, I'm happy with where some of our balances are, especially considering the public. If you have too much of a balance, the first thing the public says is, well, why are you raising rates? But here's S&P saying you don't have enough money, so we can't give you a AAA rating, so to speak. And again, we got very good ratings, but so the perspective of how you're looking at our books.
But provide a little bit more.
varies.
Provide a little bit more context to why are you having the conversation with S&P?
S&P rates our bonds. We have one outstanding rating with them right now, and that's the wastewater refunding. Basically, most of our rest of our debt is SRF, which is through the state. So I have that conversation annually with S&P.
And that bond rating is very important too, because I mean that depends what the cost of your money is going to be if you go to the open market for any funding. So I find that interesting. Normally, accountants and auditors are the most conservative group, but I guess when you're selling bonds that need to be repaid, I guess that makes you quite conservative as well. But all right. Well, then I think following the notes is some combining schedules of some of the smaller funds within the city, as well as a pretty large amount of required supplementary information, again, on the city pension plan and the city post-employment retirement benefits that are and were offered. I guess mainly previously were offered. That plan's been has been closed for a few years now, but there's some information on that as the wind down occurs there. But and then following those combining schedules of some of the smaller funds of the city, where if you want to look to drill down into, you know, some of the smaller enterprise funds, for example, the golf course, solid waste, joint powers, those combining schedules are found back in those combining schedules as well, or any of the other smaller funds if you're looking to drill into specific operations of any area within the city. Those can be found in that detail in some of these exhibits following the notes. And then the last item is the single audit section, where because the city expended more than $750,000 of federal funds in 2017, they're required to undergo what is called single audit testing, which is another layer of mainly compliance and internal control testing over how they spent the federal dollars they were awarded. And so you can see on page 86, the city expended just a little less than $1.1 million of federal funds in 2017. And so that number, since it exceeded that $750,000 threshold, which triggers that additional testing, we did do some testing on the control process that oversees how those dollars are used, and then the actual compliance on, okay, as most of you probably know, those federal funds come with many, many compliance requirements and restrictions on how they can be spent for whatever the specific grant was that the city was granted those funds for. And so we also test the compliance on, did dollar XYZ get spent for the purpose that the city was granted that dollar by ultimately the federal funding source. Now, a lot of those dollars are coming in indirectly through a state agency in a lot of cases. So going from the federal to a state agency and then ending up being awarded to the city, but ultimately has those federal compliance requirements attached to them still. So testing those items. So starting on page 86 is what's called our CFA, and then a couple opinions we have to attach related to the testing and what we found as a result of that testing, and that's what follows there to the back of the report. Any questions in that area?
Charlie, I believe you had a question, did you?
Yeah, I already asked it, thank you. My question was, it seems that the same issue that we discussed a year ago is present, and that is our finance department isn't large enough to have the sort of controls that a larger department could have or could implement, but that you find nothing in any of this that in any way would indicate anything's going on.
No, and so I think maybe what you're referring to there, Charlie, is on page 93. There's, towards the bottom of the page, we report a weakness in the internal control of the city over financial reporting, which what that means is as we do our testing of the various amounts on here, we had a few areas where, and I think as it says here, related to some expenditures, mainly that there's a few areas where we propose some journal entries to adjust a few of the mainly liability amounts that were reflected on the city's financials, which those adjustments are reflected in the numbers you have here. So they are corrected, if you will, in those few areas where we found some areas that needed to be adjusted. And so what this reporting finding on page 93 says is basically your individuals or department in responsibility for financial reporting wasn't perfect. I mean, in essence is what we were saying, and that there was a few adjustments that we had to propose to make some corrections to a few financial amounts. And I don't have that list in front of me here. I know we provided those entries to Al, and like I said, they're all adjusted here already. I mean, we had a handful of adjustments, you know, for a few one-off kind of things that that needed to be corrected to make the financial statements fairly presented, but in no way, you know, we're not talking hundreds or 50 adjustments. You know, when I say handful, I'm going to say 10 or less of a few areas. And most of them are some kind of complex type areas. Like one, for instance, is GASB 68 is a new standard that came out here 2 or 3 years ago. And that's one where the city, and actually swung back to a net asset this year to reflect their proportionate share of South Dakota Public Employment Retirement System. A convoluted calculation, and I know we spent a lot of time on that, working through the calculation and the journal entries and things like that. I mean, just some few areas like that where, you know, we help out, you know, and look over some of those calculations, and at times need to make some revisions to some of those entries that are made, but, you know, nothing that's a pervasive issue that, you know, one is we would think like we've talked before, where we would say you need to go out and hire additional staff or things like that. I mean, the cost benefit just wouldn't be there. But yet, you know, there's a few areas where, yeah, sure, if you had 1 or 2 more dedicated staff that all they had, you know, to do were a few, you know, these reporting or accounting type issues, maybe they get caught, maybe they wouldn't. But I think, you know, certainly we're not advocating that happen. So, and I guess speaking just for ourselves, you know, we issue a good number of, you know, various, from schools to counties to cities each year, and if we have 1 or 2 reports that go out without this finding, that's quite rare, just because not many people are perfect, and so it's hard to reach that standard. But so I wouldn't be alarmed by that. I guess really long story that could have been shorter there, but you know, don't be alarmed by that finding. Yep.
Are there any other commission questions for Graham? Do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. You know, I think as we've already touched on, and for both the utility funds and then the governmental funds, you know, stable to strong year, kind of depending which one you look at. And, you know, I think Al mentioned that, you know, we're down to 1 issuance of debt that's not SRF related. You know, so I think although, you know, a lot of resources are going into a few recent water projects and things like that. Even with that being said, the city's debt position is strong, and no, I don't think anything else that's comment worthy or anything of that nature. So I'd say a solid year for the city overall.
Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission on this report?
I've got one quick follow-up. You had given us a couple definitions, speaking of funds, restricted,
Sure.
committed. maybe you can give a high level of those definitions.
Oops. Yeah,
Like
actually.
restricted compared to
Yeah, I can. So I can give you definitions right here in the notes to the financials, and then I can maybe kind of put those into a little more. So if you look on page 37 of the audit report there, it actually gives the definition of each one of those fund balance types. And really, to me, the unassigned is like it sounds. It's the dollars, your property tax dollars, that are, your general levy dollars, things like that, where, however they want to spend them is probably loose. But in general, for legal, normal city operations, can do about whatever they want with them. And then, that's kind of the loosest end. And then the restricted dollars, which is kind of the other end of the spectrum, are dollars where a third party puts very specific regulation on how they can be spent. So a good example would be like your TID dollars. Those TID dollars, when they come in, can only be spent in such a way that when the TID was set up and how that was approved. Or the other one would be like your special capital, where your 1 cent sales tax dollars go, where when that got voted in, it could only be used for capital and capital type related projects. It could be used to pay for salaries or, just general day-to-day stuff. It's restricted for that capital purpose. And the restrictions have to be from a third party. It can't be the commission saying, we feel like we want to set aside these dollars for project XYZ. That's when we would get into that committed or assigned categories, where internally the city can say, we want to assign or commit some dollars to something, but it wouldn't escalate to that restricted level. That's got to come from an outside third party that can legally restrict how those funds are used.
So if the, like outside third party, like the state, if the state says, if you want to set up this particular fund, you have to have a minimum of $25,000 in that fund. If the city commission chooses, we don't think that's enough, we think we should have 50,000 or 100,000, maybe as a just in case. Would those funds, above and beyond the minimum requirements, would those also be considered restricted or in the committed category?
No, if it was not required that they had to be in there, or if they did not come from the state for that purpose, if it was just the city saying, we have $25,000 of funds to use for purpose XYZ that the state granted us, for example, to do, but we want to voluntarily. At times there's matching requirements where, grant might be, we'll pay for 80% of a new bridge project if the local government, the city in this case, kicks in the other 20%. If that's kind of situation, you'd still be in a restricted area. But if it's, we have these funds, but we just voluntarily chose to throw in another $75,000 into it, and transfer that into that fund, that voluntary piece would not be restricted. If I explained that halfway well, but.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you to Williams and Company and our finance office for all your work on making sure our finances are in order. With that, I would ask, is there a motion to accept this report?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any more commission questions? Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, number 2 under new business is consideration of memorandum 18-179 regarding our annual supply of bulk de-icing salt. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Does the commission have any questions or comments on this item? Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Number 3 under new business is consideration of memorandum 18-174 regarding resolution 18-55, which is a plat for the 2500 block of Colton Avenue, Yankton Development Enterprises LLC. Kelly Nielsen, president, is the owner. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Dave, is there anything you wish to address to the commission on this item?
Just real briefly, this is Phase 2 of Westbrook Estates. Phase 1 is pretty much sold out, so the developers, pending approval of this plat, ready to move on and start being able to sell lots in Phase 2.
If I remember correctly, there's some adjustment on some cost of housing or prices of housing that is going up in that area.
Yeah, so this phase is split into two pieces in the tax increment district. The southern piece still has the price restrictions on it. However, they were adjusted for inflation, and they are allowed to adjust for inflation over time. The north 20 lots, approximately, is in a separate section of the tax increment district where the city will retain the increment created within that TID and apply that increment towards the construction of 23rd Street in a couple of years. And that is not price restricted, those north lots, because the developer's not benefiting from those.
Are there any other commission questions? Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye, motion passes. Number 4, under new business, is consideration of memorandum 18-175 regarding resolution 18-56, which is a plat on the east side of the 2800 block of Woodbine Avenue. Kirby Hofer Construction Company, Inc. is the owner. What is your pleasure?
Move the memorandum. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dave, do you have anything? Nope. Any commission questions on this item? Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Number 5, under new business, is consideration of memorandum 18-176 regarding resolution 18-57, which is a plat of 403 Tulip Lane. Matthew Christensen, managing member of White Crane Estates LLC, is the owner. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Dave, commission, any questions? Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye, motion passes. Number 6 under new business is the introduction, first reading, and establishing September 10th, 2018 as the second reading of an ordinance to appropriate monies for defraying the necessary expenses and liabilities of the City of Yankton for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019 and ending December 31st, 2019, and providing for the levy of annual taxes for all funds created by ordinance within said city.
Introduce.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Number 7, under new business, is consideration of memorandum 18-180 regarding change order number 2 and 3 for the Pine Street Bridge project. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any commission questions or comments on this item? Does anyone from the public wish to address the commission on this item? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye, motion passes. There's no other business on tonight's agenda, and as we've said earlier, there's no executive session needed, so I will ask for a motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.